Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us and thanks for being part of our community. My name is Jason Cohen and I'll be your host for today. I'm also joined by my co-hosts, Valen Kolika, Ryan Heffernan, and Ashley Martin. A few reminders before we start. If you have issues viewing the stream at any time during the presentation and are using the web browser version of Teams, please refresh your browser. If you're using the desktop app of Teams, please exit and rejoin. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared publicly. We will post the recordings on our community at aka.ms/security-webinars. Closed captions in several languages are available during the live broadcast. You can enable them by clicking on the CC button located at the lower right corner of your screen. Feel free to ask questions at any time by typing them in the live event Q&A window by clicking on the Ask a Question button. Be aware that any questions you post will be publicly visible. However, if you prefer, you can post your question anonymously by checking the box right below where you enter it. We often get many questions on these webinars, and we will do our best to respond to all of them in real time. In the event if the answer was not provided, or if you may have additional questions post this event, please don't hesitate to raise them on our Azure Sentinel forum at aka.ms/Azure Sentinel community. We love to hear your feedback on how we can improve these webinars. You can do so at aka.ms/security-webinar feedback. And by the way, all the links that I'm announcing will be shared with you on the chat or the live event Q&A window. I would also like to invite you to join our public community by visiting aka.ms/security community. That's the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements. On our community, you can speak directly to our engineering teams that create our security products. You'll be able to influence our product designs and get early access to changes by doing things like participating in private previews at aka.ms/prseccomm, request features, give feedback, review our product roadmaps, register for events, or join webinars like this. We believe that the best way to improve our products is by removing any barriers between you and the people that create them. So we hope you'll join us. Before I introduce our presenters, we have a poll we would like for you to participate in that will affect how we share recordings of these webinars in the future. Please direct yourself to pollev.com/sec-webinars to respond. The URL is also shown on the screen. We'll give it a few seconds for everybody to join. And first, we would like to know where our viewers are located. So if you could take just a quick moment. See, we've got some international folks attending. Give it about another 30 seconds.
We have a cross-Atlantic race here now.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping there's going to be some troopers from my old part of the world, Australia and New Zealand, but it is the middle of the night, so probably not.
Wow, fantastic engagement. Thank you so much. All right, I think we'll move on to the next question. So we would like to know if you would like us to continue publishing the MP4 files for each webinar or just provide the YouTube link. We'll give this about 30 seconds as well. Lots of engagement. Thank you. This gives us a lot of insight, so we really appreciate it. And we'll move on. So I will go ahead and announce the presenters. In today's session, Sarah Young and Prateek Taneja will take us through what's new in Azure Sentinel automation. Sarah is a senior program manager, while Prateek is a security program manager, both with the Azure Sentinel team. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to them. Sarah, Prateek, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jason. I will start with presenting my screen.
Cool. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. So today we're going to talk about what's new in Sentinel automation. Lots of cool stuff. Of course, we've been automating things for a long time, ever since we started Sentinel, but there's been lots of really cool improvements recently. So Prateek and I just wanted to take you through some of those. How we're going to do this is for the first bit of the webinar, Prateek's going to talk you through it. We're going to show you some slides, which of course will be shared after the presentation. And then I'm going to show you a demo, and hopefully the demo gods are kind to me and the whole thing works, but we'll see a little bit of it in real life as well. Jason very kindly introduced us, but if you haven't joined a webinar I've done before, my name's Sarah Young. I'm a senior program manager in the Azure Sentinel Customer Experience Engineering team. I'm really pleased to be here. I recently moved, as you may have gathered if you heard earlier, I recently moved from a different part of the world, and it's really great now that I get to do these webinars in waking hours, which is great. So thanks for joining. Prateek, do you want to introduce yourself and take it away with the slides?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. So I'm Prateek Taneja. I am a security program manager with Microsoft, and I've been with Microsoft for about 7 years. Really excited to get things started, and here is our agenda for today. So I'll take you through a quick recap of what playbooks are, how they make up the automation with Azure Sentinel. We'll discuss the different playbook triggers that are available, and once we've covered that ground, we've set the stage, we'll take you through the incident triggers, which is new. After we've discussed incident triggers, we'll go through what automation rules are, and then the finale would be the latest and greatest with Azure Sentinel automation, the template gallery for playbooks. Once I'm done talking, obviously I'll pass the baton to Sarah to take you through a very insightful demo to put all the pieces together. Before I start, I want to basically set the stage with the fundamental goal for all automation in security operations. And it's basically to allow analysts and SOC engineers to better automate their incident triage and response processes to lower the SOC's MTTR, or the mean time to respond. With that in mind, let's do a quick recap of what playbooks are in Azure Sentinel. And playbooks, in theory, are a collection of automated actions that are stitched together in a workflow. It's basically an action in response to an alert or an incident. And so it makes up Azure Sentinel's SOAR, or security orchestration, automation and response capability, which under the hood uses Logic Apps. And I'm sure you have, but if you haven't, Azure Logic Apps is an Azure service that provides automation across the Azure cloud, including for Azure Sentinel. Playbooks can be used in multiple ways depending on the nature of orchestration and the nature of response required. But to discuss a couple of few common scenarios or use cases, playbooks can be used for notification or alerting. So when let's say a detection logic or analytic rule in Azure Sentinel matches an alert or an incident is created, and an example, you might want to notify in a scenario where an incident is raised, and you might want to notify a team of analysts, maybe SOC leads, service owners, when an anomaly or ambiguous behavior is detected. It could be over an email or Microsoft Teams or any other collaboration platform that your organization uses. Playbooks can be created to take remedial action within the IT environment to contain or even stop a security incident. An example for this could include maybe isolating a virtual machine that has an Azure Defender alert raised for it, for example, or blocking an account of a user in Azure AD when an activity indicates a potential compromise, or maybe taking, let's say, an IP address from an incident and writing a block rule to the firewall to stop traffic from that IP address. The last but another popular use case for playbooks is enrichment, or basically supplying supplementary or providing supplementary data to enrich raw logs and results. Now, this can be done as an alert or an incident is triggered, or during an investigation by a SOC analyst to, for instance, check if an IP address in the incident matches a third-party intel feed from, let's say, VirusTotal. Now, I spoke about playbooks being triggered on alerts and incidents, and let's double click on that. Let's dive a little deeper and first begin with clarifying some of the terminologies and how we use them with Azure Sentinel. Now, we know Sentinel collects events from multiple data sources. These logs or events have detection logic or analytic rules written on top of them to aggregate or correlate based on a defined condition and then create alerts. The multiple alerts can then be stacked or grouped together based on a grouping condition and then create incidents out of them. Now, something we've had in Sentinel for a long time is the Azure Sentinel, the alert trigger, which would need your logic app or your playbook to start with an alert trigger connector, and that would bring in all contextual information from the alert. What's new with Azure Sentinel Automation is the incident trigger, which gives you now the ability to create your playbooks or your logic apps that trigger on incidents instead of individual alerts within that incident, which again, in turn would mean that you bring contextual information from the incident instead of individual alerts within that incident. Now let's draw a quick comparison between an incident trigger logic app and an alert trigger logic app. Let me grab a pointer if I can. Right. So in terms of setting automated responses, an incident or a playbook with an incident trigger would actually create or run that automated response when an incident is created on Azure Sentinel, whereas, as the name suggests, with an alert trigger, the playbook that has an alert trigger defined would trigger when an alert is raised on Azure Sentinel. In terms of running them manually, the alert or the playbooks with alert triggers can at the moment be run manually from the alert tabs, from the investigation experience, or from your bookmarked queries. At the moment, the incident triggered playbooks cannot be run manually, but that would change. That could change. Visually, how logic app triggers would look like is this. So on the left, you see a connector, a logic app connector that has a trigger with the incident creation rule, and on the right, you have a logic app connector for triggering a playbook when an alert is generated. If you have to see on the Sentinel UI, this is how you'd distinguish. So keep an eye on the trigger kind column. This is how you'd visually identify a playbook that is available with an alert trigger, and this is how a playbook with the incident trigger would look like. And let's talk about what's new, right? What's with the incident trigger and all you need to know about it. Now, incident triggers are recommended, of course. This is a public preview feature at the time of the recording at this point, but again, that could change in the future. Like I said, incident triggers are recommended for most automation scenarios unless you have an explicit need to create a playbook for individual alerts. Now, if and when you're creating an automation rule, if that term confuses you, hold that thought. I'll discuss automation rule in the next slide. But if and when you're creating an automation rule, you can use only playbooks that have an incident trigger. Playbooks with alert triggers cannot be used in automation rules. In terms of permissions, now Azure Sentinel requires explicit permissions on the resource group that hosts your playbooks, and you can do that directly from the automation rules UI without leaving the Azure Sentinel page. So you don't have to switch back and forth between screens to provide the permission on the resource group. You could do it directly from the UI. This is how the permissions or the required permissions are displayed on the automation rules page when you're trying to add your playbook to an automation rule. There are some limitations that currently exist, and when I say current, it could change, or this would change in the future. At the moment, it cannot be run manually from the Azure Sentinel, unlike a playbook with an alert trigger that can be run from multiple places, like we discussed in the previous slide. And it doesn't support alert grouping. So when the playbook triggers with an incident trigger, it brings with itself only the first alert from the incident, and not the entire chain of alerts. Automation rules then. Automation rules basically help to better handle incidents, and this could be, allowing to automate responses from multiple analytic rules at once. It could be automatically tagging or assigning or closing incidents without the need for playbooks, and you could control the order in which the actions are executed with automation rules. There are three key ingredients or three components when you're creating an automation rule. The first one is the trigger itself. So the automation rules are triggered when the incident is triggered, as you can see from the screenshot on the right-hand side of the screen as well. The next thing you do when creating an automation rule is defining your conditions. And defining conditions gives you control by configuring a comprehensive set of conditions on the incident and the entity details to control if the actions, or if and when the actions should be executed. The next component is the actions themselves. So the actions will be executed in a definite order, in the order that you define them, if the conditions that you define prior to actions are met. The actions that are supported right now with automation rules are: you could run a playbook, you could change the status of an incident, you could change the severity of an incident, you could assign an incident to a specific to an owner, or you could add you could add tags to an incident. What you also see towards the bottom end of the screenshot, let me grab that pointer again, right here. So what you could also do is set the automation rule to expire after a defined period. So and while you do all of that, there are more triggers, conditions, and actions that will be introduced in the future. This is what we have at this point. Quick recap of what Playbook templates are before I introduce you to the very cool Playbook Gallery. But what are Playbook templates? These are pre-built, tested, ready-to-use, customizable workflows that give references for best practices when a SOC analyst or a security operations engineer is developing playbooks from scratch. They can also be used as inspirations to draw from when you're creating new automation scenarios. Who develops these? Who develops the templates? Primarily developed by the Azure Sentinel community, the ISVs or independent software vendors, and Microsoft's own experts who interact with Sentinel quite often. Until now, the deployment options for deploying playbooks using Playbook templates have been one with ARM templates. So you could use, or you could create, rather reuse an ARM template and deploy your playbook, or you could use a simpler option by going to the Sentinel GitHub repository and clicking the Deploy to Azure button, which takes you again to their subscription, easier way to deploy your Playbook template. And I mentioned up until now. What you have now is the latest and greatest, as I call it, with Azure Sentinel automation, the Playbook Gallery. And again, this is a public preview feature. At the time where we're doing this session, it would change in the future. But it's the Playbook templates that are displayed here. Sorry, let me bring that up. Yep. So the Playbook templates that are displayed under the Playbooks Gallery demonstrate leading automation scenarios that security operations centers tend to use to get ideas from or inspiration from. And most of these excuse me. And most of these playbooks were contributed by, like I said, the central community, and were originally located from or located in the Azure Sentinel GitHub repository. Some of these have been integrated into Azure Sentinel solutions as well, so they're being shipped when you try to onboard a new data connector. Now you can see columns on the screenshot for each and every template, and these can be really helpful when you're trying to search for a template that suits a specific requirement or a use case. Grab that famous pointer again. All right, so you first have the trigger, and the trigger can be based on, like we discussed, an incident. It could be an alert, or it could be something else like a recurring schedule. The next thing you have is the logic app connector. So this will show you the external services that this particular playbook will interact with. Then you have the entities, which show the entity types that are explicitly filtered and parsed by the playbook. And then there are tags, excuse me, lost my pointer there, but there are tags that show labels that are applied to playbooks to relate to it or related to a scenario. It could be remediation, enrichment, incident management, or of the like. So it gives you a starting point to search for a playbook template that would really suit your need. Next, I will pass it over to Sarah to go through a demo and help us put all of this together. Over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Prateek. I'm just going to let you keep sharing your screen for a second whilst I talk, because obviously you may notice I've been monitoring the questions. They've been quite busy. I'm just going to stop. Normally we would wait till the end, but we're tracking well for time. And there is just one question that I wanted to address before we go any further, just because I think it will help people's understanding. A few people have asked, what's the difference between an incident and an alert? And that's a great question. And just that specific question I'm going to address now, and then we'll come back to the rest of the questions at the end. But obviously my lovely colleagues will also be answering them in the chat as well. So just to talk about this one though, so an alert, in fact, I will share my screen right now because I'll just explain. I think it will help explain how this works. So what I'm going to show you here is, excuse me whilst I just get the right screen. So what I'm going to show you here is, here's my Sentinel workspace. And just to explain here, so when we create an analytics rule, think of an alert like, an alert is something that's notable, but not necessarily something that we always want to raise an incident on. We might want to wait for a collection of alerts. So alerts are like something of note, but we wouldn't always want to raise an incident. So if we have a look at it, I'm just going to pick a random, I'm going to pick a completely random analytics rule here to have a look at. So what we've got here is we have our incident settings, and this is where we need to be, and you can do this on every single incident. So what we can see here is we can, when we've got an analytics rule, we have the logic, and of course the logic runs against tables, and it runs, however, whatever frequency you configure, and what it shows. And what we have here is incident settings. So what we can do here is we can say, we can create an incident from when this rule is triggered. If we disable that, what happens is, rather than create an incident, it will just create an alert. An alert is stored in our security alerts table. So if I have a look in my workspace and I have a look at security alerts, 10. I don't know what's in here at the moment. We'll have a look. So you can see I've got alerts that have been triggered by this analytics rule. Now we don't have to raise an incident. We might choose to, lots of people do, but we don't have to. And what you can do with automation is you can, if you don't want to, if it's something that you need to fix or automate, or you just need an alert for your you just need an alert to be registered. You can then layer both automation and analytics rules on top of it. So you may choose, for example, to run a number of alerts, and then so they get stored here in the security alert table, but then you might have another analytics rule that says, if I see the following number of alerts and I see the following if I see this collection of alerts and I see so many of them in a certain period of time, then of course we will choose to actually raise an incident. So it just allows for that flexibility in order to you want to log it, but you don't necessarily want to raise an incident. And it also means that we can run automation against an alert without necessarily raising an incident. So there's lots of different options here. Precisely what you want to do, of course, is going to very much depend on your actual deployment, your operations process, but hopefully, because as you can, I'll just go back to this analytics rule, because if we do alert grouping, this is where we can say, you know, don't create this analytics rule until, you know, don't create an incident until we've got certain numbers of alerts. But it's just a different flexible way. It's when you get more when you increase maturity and you understand what you're looking for in your environment and you get more mature, you don't necessarily want to raise an incident every single time. You might want to wait till you've got a number of alerts. It's just reducing that noise and just giving you more flexibility and, you know, making sure your analysts work on what they're supposed to work on. Hopefully that makes sense. Now I'll properly start the demo, but hopefully that makes a bit of sense and clarifies slightly what we're doing. What I'm actually going to do is just stop sharing my screen for a second because I'm going to move it onto my big screen because that will be a bit easier to share. Now I know that this is my big dual screen and I think that you folks, I need to just change my Zoom settings so you'll be able to see this sufficiently. So we'll zoom in a bit. As you can see, I have my Slack here. So I'm going to zoom in. Please feel free to put in the comments the questions and comments. I can see them on my other screen. If this isn't big enough, hopefully it is. So now let's talk about automation and what everything Prateek's been talking about. So let's start with let's start and have a look. Now you may notice, of course, we've now changed. We now have an automation tab here as well. And we've now got a number of different rules here. So we've got a number of different tabs. We have automation rules. We've got our active playbooks, which of course you'll be familiar with. That's been there for a long time. And we have our Playbook templates. Now, just to get things going in this workspace, I'm going to turn on my test rule. And what I have here is I've got a very simple rule that's just saying that I've written just suspicious deployment of resources. I'm just going to enable that. So what this is doing is looking in my Azure activity table for anything where I've actually generated a deployment. Of course, this is a very, very simple this is a very, very basic rule just for the purposes of a demo, but that analytics rule will be running every 5 minutes or so. Now, so I'll leave that to run and we'll go back to automation. Now, what I'm going to do is create an automation rule. Now, automation rules are
change severity, they are ways of doing some some basic things where you don't need a whole playbook. So for this one, I'm just going to pick my rule, suspicious deployment of new resources. You can have lots of different conditions here. So you can have, you know, the title or the severity, it contains, does not contain. So there's lots of different things you can layer. And then we have actions. So for this one, I'm going to change the status, and I'm going to change it from new to active. I could also assign an owner. I could assign tags. These are all like things that are important to do that you don't want an analyst to have to do, to be honest with you, because it's time waste. You know, it's not a good use of their time. But of course, it's something that's important to do. So I'm going to apply that. Oh yeah, I didn't actually. Oh yeah, I removed that one. So I'm just going to apply that. So what happens is that with this automation rule, that if, so the conditions of course are if this rule runs, then we're going to change the status. I've put it for indefinite, and I'm changing the status from new to active. So if I go back to my analytics rule here, where we've got that suspicious deployment, if I actually have a look at the analytics rule, then we can also see that if I go to automated response, you can see that it does show that I've got the, you can see here that we do have, that we can see that we've assigned that automation. Just a note now, you can see here, this is on the alert automation for analytics rules. Here, I can only select something that's going to run on the alert. Now, I just talked about the difference between an alert and an incident. So you'll notice here, I can assign some playbooks, which is what we was able to do in the past. But here we can only do alerts. I will talk about how we do the incident trigger in a second. So if I have a look now, hopefully, I don't know if enough time has passed. Let's see, not quite yet. We'll give it another few minutes. We should see some more incidents in here. So going back to automation, of course, you might be asking, well, you know, we've already talked about these incident triggers. How am I going to run a playbook? So what we're going to do is run another automation rule. Playbook. So again, I'm going to pick here. I'm going to pick my suspicious deployment of new resources. This time, though, I'm going to say run a playbook. Now, this is something that catches people out a lot. So this is where we run playbooks that have the new incident trigger, because an automation rule only runs when an incident is created, and therefore it takes all the entities and it will put them into a playbook. The automation piece that's part of the analytics rule will just run on the alert. And in time, we'll probably see people largely, you know, using more incidents than anything. But you know, obviously that's going to take some time. So what I'm going to do here is like pick a playbook. Now you can see that at the moment everything's grayed out and I don't have permissions. The reason for that is when you do this for the first time, there is a service account that needs to have the correct permissions in your resource group to be able to run playbooks. Now, this happens to a lot of people. You can see here that we actually have a little automatic manage playbook permissions. And I'm going to go down, pick my resource group, hit apply, and it's going to give me those permissions. And now if you see, I have all of these playbooks available to me. So I'm going to click this post message in Slack, and you can see that we have an order as well. So you can layer multiple actions in one automation rule, but just for clarity here, I've done a separate one. So this will be order number 2. Now, of course, you can change these as well in the order you want them executed. So I'm going to hit apply to run the Slack playbook. I'll run the Slack playbook automation rule. So I'm going to apply that. And now we can see we've got both of them here. Now, if we go back, I'm hoping we should have some incidents now. Clearly, we do not, which is interesting. Which is certainly interesting because we should do. So now we'll do as ever, just to check everything is good. I will just do a little bit of live troubleshooting because I do want to show you it working. Obviously, good fun to watch someone have to troubleshoot something in real life. Should go. Always good fun. The demo gods are clearly not my friends today. We'll just give it a minute. It looks like it's looks like we should work. Anyway, I'll give it another second. So in the meantime, though, we'll talk about the Playbook templates. Now, this is something, again, that Prateek talked about. We've now got Playbook templates within the Sentinel UI, which is something we desperately needed. Because we did have it in the Sentinel repo, and so you could go in and you could go in there and you could deploy them as an ARM template. But now we've made it even easier because you can see that they're actually within the UI itself. Now I'll just expand a couple of these out. So you can see here what we have is we have a list of the different names of those playbooks. We also have the trigger, so you can see whether it's an alert trigger or an incident trigger. We also have the entities that are involved, and we also tag the playbook. So what we've done with the tagging of the Playbook templates is we've used remediation, we've done response, and we've got things like sync. So if you're syncing to ServiceNow or something like Zendesk, etc., some kind of third-party ticketing system, they're all here. Now, the one that I deployed, and I did do this earlier, was post a message in Slack. Now, I'll show you how this works. I'm not going to fully deploy it just because I don't want to overwrite what I already did. But what we do here is you can see it's all templatized. So as you do with most Azure resources, we'll pick a subscription, we'll pick a resource group. Now it's going to pick the region that we're already using. So depending on your subscription and resource group, and then there's a playbook name. As I said, you can see here that we've done post message in Slack. Now it's given me a note that I've already got a playbook with this name, which I already showed you. So I could change this to post message in Slack 1. It doesn't like that, so I'll just do that. It shouldn't have a space, and now it won't overwrite it. We can also click enable diagnostics logs. The reason we enable diagnostics logs is that we can report on whether the playbooks are failing or not. So whether you want to report on that or not, you can click here, and we can also associate with the ISV environment. If we click here, we'll have a look at the connections. Of course, if you're familiar with playbooks, we need to add connections. So for Sentinel, something will be configured that's live. We will configure a connection. For Slack, we will do the same thing. And then we can go to review and create. And like everything in Azure, we do that validation, and then we create it, and we continue to the Logic App Designer. So what's happening here is we're just doing an ARM template deployment, as you would expect. So we're going to submit that. It's going to chug along, and it's going to create our playbook and go along to the Logic App Designer. So rather than wait for that to deploy, I will just, like the children's TV shows, here's one I made earlier. So this is the Slack playbook that I created, or the one I did last night. So you can see here that it's using the Sentinel incident creation rule, and we're posting a message in Slack. So it's posting, and you can see on the right hand side here we've got my Slack, and what it's doing is we're going to post to the general channel, and then we've used the dynamic content. So every time an incident is triggered, we'll get an incident title, an incident description, severity, and the created time. I've also configured some additional parameters here, which is the I've change the bot name so it posts as Azure Sentinel. There are other parameters here as well that you can pick, depending on whatever you want to do now. Now, just to show you, I can actually run this trigger manually to test it's working. Now, I will say, I'll show you what happens here, but when I run this trigger, because I'm not running it on a real incident, all of that dynamic content is going to be empty because it's not running from a real incident. So if I run that trigger, if you have a look at my Slack on the right-hand side, in a second, hopefully, we should see those empty. We should see, hopefully, those empty alert coming in from there you go, and you can see it's in Slack there. We can see the empty incident come in, the empty message come in. Of course, that's because I ran that on not a real incident. Now, obviously, as I said, the demo gods apparently don't favor me today. So I'm just going to, as I said, bit of live troubleshooting. I might just so I can show you what it looks like for a real thing. We will just change this analytics rule. You'll have to, I'm just going to take something that's recent. So what I'm doing here, just because I should, I'm just going to pick something in my Azure activity that actually has happened recently. As I said, there should have been something else. And if I just change this, I'm hoping that it will trigger something that will actually trigger an incident. So my apologies, this was working last night. And as I said, the demo gods do not favor me. I'm just going to have a look whilst we wait for that, hopefully, to do something. I'm just going to have a look at the questions and see if there's anything that I can answer. So I'm just going to go to the top and have a look. Dean asks, oh, Dean, I'm glad you're enjoying the troubleshooting. In terms of, do the automation rules show up anywhere else in Azure, like the playbooks show up in the Logic app portal? They do not. Sentinel automation rules are in fact just part of Sentinel. They're not part of Logic app, so you'll only see them in Sentinel because they're part of the Sentinel container. They're not shared with anything else. I know someone says, why choose Slack over Teams? I'm just showing, for the purposes of this demo, I just wanted to show that we can support everything. Azure Sentinel is not just for Microsoft products. It is indeed for all the different, it is the theme. We work with all different products and we want to show that we can integrate to everything because, of course, you know, we don't assume that all our customers use 100% Microsoft. We are, though, if you want to learn more about, as Valon has answered, but if you want to learn more about Teams integration, my colleague Neelam and I, in a couple of weeks' time, are actually doing a webinar just about Teams integration, which is going to be very cool. So definitely tune in for that in a few weeks' time. Dean says, why would we want to leave diagnostic logs disabled for a playbook? The only reason I give Dean, personally, I would enable them, but diagnostic logs do increase your ingestion rate, so there is an associated charge with that. It is relatively minor. It's not a huge amount of ingestion, but if you did want to, do that, if you had a lot of Logic apps, potentially, perhaps you wouldn't want to do that, but you know, it's completely up to you. Now, as I said, demo gods are not being kind to me, but I'll give it a few more minutes to see if I can get it. So when we have Azure Sentinel connected with Cloud App Security and there's alert triggered, yes, Anonymous asked, can we sync? Basically, Anonymous asked, can we sync Cloud App Security There is a way of doing that. We do have some playbooks that allow some syncing between the products. Hopefully one of my colleagues who's helping answer questions can possibly find the resources we have on that, can post a link to that. But yes, it is possible to synchronize that.
And just to provide an answer to someone is asking as far as why you're presenting two screens in one and why not one. So Sarah is providing here an apple-to-apple comparison as she's actually connecting to Slack. She also showing on the other screen how Slack is behaving with the steps she's taken from the Azure Sentinel side. So that's why we have two screens in one.
As I said, I will try one more whilst because as I said, I am not, as I said, the demo gods clearly do not favor me today. Whilst I continue to answer questions, I will give it one more go to try and fix this. And if not, I will leave it to your imaginations as to how that works. I will do one more thing to see if I can get that to. I will do one more go at seeing if we can get that to work. As I said, definitely worked last night when I did my double check this was all working. But I'll do one more go and then I'll answer a few more questions. And if that doesn't work, I'll let all you good people go about your day. Yeah, that's someone asks. Aha, there you go. Thank you, Demagods. You can see here, if I refresh, we should have another incident. So what we've done, you can see here, as that incident has been raised, my suspicious deployment of new resources, straight away, you can see that was pretty immediate. As the incident was triggered, it's triggered something in Slack. And you can see, because this is now related to an incident, it has actually populated the whole thing. So we've got the suspicious deployment of new resources, we've got the description, what the severity has come through, the time it was created, and I've written, please investigate. So hooray, thank you, Demagods. I think that we have, by the way, if anyone was interested what I did there, to fix that, I actually changed the lookup period if I did it too quickly. I don't think the Azure activity logs came through quick enough this morning for the stuff I did pre this webinar. There you go. As you can see, troubleshooting is fun. That is actually everything I had to show you. Hopefully that was interesting for you. I think I've also answered. I think I've answered all the questions as we were going. Whilst we were waiting for that to work, so I think that we can possibly end it there, and I'll pass back to Valon and Jason to wrap up this webinar. Thank you all for your attendance and your patience whilst I troubleshooted that, and hopefully you found that a useful session.
Great, thank you so much. We actually do have a couple more questions, if that's all right.
Oh, of course, yeah. If I've missed some, yeah, please please fire away, Jason.
Oh, great. Okay, so first one is, for the incident playbook trigger, does the incident trigger post grouping of events around a certain threshold, or does it trigger at first sight of incident? It will trigger as soon as you have triggered, as soon as an incident is triggered. So however you've configured it to trigger an incident, because I know what that person is referring to. They're referring to, I'll just pick a rule. They're referring to these incident settings. It's saying how the alerts are triggered and then grouped into incidents. So how the incident trigger works is, however, whenever an incident is triggered, that's when that playbook
that's when the incident trigger kicks in. So even if you're grouping more alerts, unless it's triggering a fresh incident, then it's not going to re-trigger. So it very much depends on how you have configured this part of your analytics rule. It's only at the moment on that initial trigger of incident. So yeah, hopefully that explains that a bit more clearly to you.
Great, thank you. The next one we have is, are there any recommendations for tagging playbooks?
Good question. I would say not exactly. I would say, I say this with all of tagging, so I'll apologize. As you see in our, what we do with our tagging internally in Microsoft is we just tag on the type of, playbooks that we have here. So you can see we tag on remediation. Let me expand this a little bit. Hopefully you can see. We do remediation, response, we have sync, we have enrichment. Personally, what I would do is, I think it very much depends on your operational processes. I think doing this tagging around what the automation actually does is a really good idea, but also you may want to do it based on maybe a particular part of the business, or maybe it's for a particular part of your infrastructure. I wouldn't say we have specific recommendations, but I always say with tagging, you need to create tags that make sense to you and your organization and that work for your security processes, because really tagging is about being able to search and being able to categorize things. So, you know, do what makes sense for your organization.
Great. The next one is, are there any plans to change the verbiage on alert triggers from when a response to an Azure Sentinel alert is triggered? Shouldn't it be when an Azure Sentinel alert is triggered?
That's a good question. I'm not aware that there are plans to do that at the moment, but that's really good feedback. And I will mention that to the folks in the product group who do the verbiage for that. But that's really great feedback and a good point. And I'll just stop there. As you can see now, my analytics rule is running because this analytics rule runs every 5 minutes. You'll actually see that bang on 5 minutes later, the rule has run again and it has created a fresh incident. Now, I'll also point out that this isn't particularly good practice because it's actually running, there is some overlap and it's running on the same set of logs just for the purposes of demo, but I just wanted to show you there on the screen that it is working now.
That's great. We have just a few more. I know there are plans to include a trigger for automation rules that would include incident update. When is that supposed to go to preview?
That's a good question. What I would recommend you do is join the, and you probably, I think this person probably already is a member of that. But if you're interested in finding out in advance some of the new features that are coming, then I recommend that you join our private preview community. Possibly one of my colleagues can put in the chat the link to sign up for that, because what you have to do is you can join the private community. We have to validate that you have an NDA with Microsoft, but then you'll get added to a Teams channel where you can see all the most recent updates and the things that are coming. So I would definitely check out that if you're not already a member, and also you can ask questions directly in that closed chat to the Microsoft engineers who work on the product and the features.
Great. Next is, are these Playbook templates available in Gov GCC High?
That is an excellent question. That is something that I actually don't know off the top of my head. I do apologize. This demo I'm showing you is in commercial. I believe they should be. Usually things in Gov are available pretty soon after they come into commercial. And I'll apologize. I do not know the answer to that off the top of my head, but if you keep an eye out, it will be coming soon, because if it's not there now, because always try and have parity as close as possible for when new things come out.
Great. The next one is, can you query Azure resources in KQL-based tags?
That's, I think I would need a little bit more information. I can't answer that just with the information given, and I'll explain. If you've got time and you're still there, person who asked that question, please feel free to expand. It would depend what we do. There are parts of the tables that do have the tags in, but it would depend on precisely what you were querying and what table you were looking at. So I'm afraid I can't answer that question just with the information there, so apologies. But certainly I know, like in analytics rules and in incident tables, you can there is the availability, because we do have the JSON array that does have tags, but sorry, I can't answer. So possibly you can, it depends precisely what you're trying to query. So apologies for not being able to answer that in more detail.
All right, and last three, is there plans to support Power Automate as the destination playbook?
I don't believe so. I'm not. We are. I don't think so. I'm not super familiar with Power Automate, but I can tell you that our plan is to use Logic Apps as our main source of automation.
Great.
But of course, it might be possible, not knowing, if you desperately wanted to use Power Automate, it might be possible that you could use a playbook to kick off some automation in Power Automate, though that might be quite tricky and convoluted, but potentially maybe you could do something like that.
Great. Next one. Are we able to do all the automation capabilities currently on-premise in Azure Sentinel, or is there any limitation there?
That's a good question. Depends. Certainly, it really depends what you want to do. So we do support automation on-prem as well. We have something called a Logic Apps Gateway, which is designed to talk down to on-premise things. Generally, as a very wide, broad brush strokes, if something has an API or a way that Logic Apps can communicate with it, then certainly it is possible for us to, it's probably possible for Logic Apps to talk to that resource and be able to work with it and interact with it and do some automation. So generally, I'd say yes, we can support. Generally, we can support on-prem resources, but and doing automation with them. But it will depend on whether we've got a way to communicate with that specific resource. But by and large, yes, we can.
Great. Last one. Please clarify: are incidents defined by the operator, or does Azure auto-generate some?
Good question. Incidents are always defined incidents are always defined, and I'll show you by you and what you define in your workspace. So incidents always come from analytics rules and analytics rules templates. So we do have we give you rule templates, but unless you turn these rule templates on, it's not, and you activate them, it's not going to generate any incidents. So I would say, so yes, you have to define what analytics rules you want to run, and they will create incidents.
Great. Thank you so much. And I want to thank Sarah and Prateek for being our guests today and for an excellent presentation. And thank you to the rest of the team who helped answer questions. At the same time, I would like to remind the listeners that the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements is to visit our landing page at aka.ms/securitycommunity. And while there, you'll find easy ways to navigate and find the resources and learning content relevant to our security products and their communities. A good start would be browsing our bite-sized product videos, ninja trainings, recordings of past webinars, GitHub communities, and more. We love to hear your feedback on how we can improve these webinars. Please take a minute submitting your webinar feedback at aka.ms/security webinar feedback. Thank you, and see you next time. Goodbye.